Hi, welcome. I just wanted to let you guys know who I am. My name is DJ Carey, and I'm the editorial director for Cottages and Gardens Publishing. We have 4 magazines. We have Hampton's Cottages and Gardens, Connecticut Cottages and Gardens, New York Cottages and Gardens, and our newest baby is San Francisco Cottages and Gardens. Our brands of magazines focus on design for the upscale reader. Month to month, our pages are filled with what's new in design, and we profile homes that the editors feel are sophisticated and well designed. I'm very honored to have been asked by Be Originals America, an organization that is focused on educating the designer, the manufacturer, the retailer, and lastly, the consumer about authenticity of product in the market. I hope that the discussion today will inform and enlighten you regarding the growing problem of knockoffs and counterfeits goods in the marketplace. And I encourage all of you to please go on to beoriginalamerica's.com. There's really great information there. And I think it's the next step after you hear what's going on in the industry. It's a great source. I would like to now introduce our panel. Immediately to my right is Paolo Gravetti, and since 2008, Paolo served as the managing director for Alessi USA, a world leader and innovator of design concepts. He's responsible for sales and marketing for Alessi in the US and Canada, and is responsible for the future growth of the company. But before joining Alessi, Mr. Gravetti also served as a managing director for Cartel US and DeLonghi America. And he's also a charter member of Be Original, so he's passionate about this conversation and about this topic. Next to Paolo is Howard Thornton, a buyer of design objects which include pieces for the home, office, furnishings, lighting for San Francisco Museum of Modern Art store. He previously was the assistant director of retail and product development at Oakland Museum of California, a founder of Triangle Studio, a design and product development firm based in San Francisco, and is a licensed architect. Jamie Derringer is the founder and editor of modern design blog Design Milk, which is recognized as a leading voice in art and design on various social media platforms with 4 million followers. So, let me tell you, she's a powerhouse. Her passion for dogs inspired her to then go on in 2012 to launch another blog, Dog Milk, which for dog owners with a modern style, and is a founding media sponsor of Be Original. Josh Mintz is the director of merchandising for the Dwell store, which curates products for a modern home. Before taking his post at Dwell's store, Josh gained retail experience by working at Design Within Reach and Uncommon Goods. In these positions, Josh developed an extensive network of designers, brands, artists, and manufacturers. And he has a law degree too, and he's personally a member of Be Original, and Dwell is also a media sponsor. So, welcome. So I'm gonna start this off with kind of basic questions because I think there's a lot of confusion about this topic. So I'm gonna start with a really easy question, but I need answering for my own knowledge. So can someone tell me what the difference between a knockoff and a counterfeit? Is there a difference? Is there like different, like is one worse than the other? They don't even like this question, can you tell? Anybody?
I guess we can approach this from like a consumer standpoint. I can't come up with an honest distinction. I don't know that. I think a counterfeit could be that it's such a literal copy that it's holding itself out to be exactly what you think it is, and it's not. Whereas I think a knockoff might be marketed with a different brand or no brand at all and a different price. But honestly, I think it's a great question. It's not so easy because we all think about knockoffs in a different way, and knockoff is like the word of the day and an easy one to focus on. But copies, I mean, there's a lot of synonyms, and they probably have different connotations within the marketplace, and that's probably what matters most.
But Can I
I
just
would
be
give it a-
really ignorant here? I always thought a counterfeit was the one with like the fake Gucci label on
Yeah,
it.
that's what I think.
Okay, thank God.
I think the counterfeit is the fake Gucci bag, and a knockoff is a bag that looks like Gucci, but it's another brand.
So
or
it's actually
unbranded.
labeled where a
Yes.
knockoff doesn't always label,
Yeah.
right?
I would agree with that.
That's what I would think.
Uh-oh, Howard's mic isn't
Hello?
working.
Sure.
Oh, I agree. No.
It's important to be heard, right?
Hello?
Jamie, you were about to say something.
I was going to say one of the words I dislike the most sometimes is reproduction, because sometimes I see it and I know it's not a licensed reproduction, and I think sometimes that's a problem because people will see the word reproduction and assume that it's just a reissue of an older design and assume that it's authentic, and in fact it's just a fake. So there's just some weird semantic issues going on.
I think that's really interesting. Jamie and I were talking earlier, and I think the big takeaway I got was anything that causes confusion in the consumer's mind, you got to stay away from, because it's counterfeit or a knockoff, but it's causing confusion. And I think in the legal terms, that's like the key phrasing is it's confusion for the consumer. Do you think that in the world of design we're seeing this counterfeit with labeling, or is it more knockoffs or reproductions? I mean, like, are you guys actually seeing mislabeled items, or is it just the style is of?
I think the law is more developed in the area where you're actually using a trademark or a brand, and because of the potential legal ramifications of that, and that's much more of a black-white issue, you see less of that. I also think, though, it varies by categories. So, obviously, like a keychain, a fake Louis Vuitton wallet keychain, or a fake Rolex watch, that's a little bit different than a chair which might not be branded in such a powerful way.
But some chairs are actually branded, and that's how, when you see it, you know it's a fake. So I guess in the world of design, in terms of lighting, in terms of textiles, textiles, they're branded. So, I mean, where's the bulk of this problem arising from? Just the concept of it being reworked and reworked badly, or an exact copy, not made by the original designer?
You see a lot of knockoffs without the brand, the original brand. I don't think that any example comes to mind in our industry, in the design industry, of an imitation that actually also has the brand of the original product. So I think the big bulk of the problem is on imitations, unbranded imitations or knockoffs that have a different brand.
All right, why don't you explain and tell people what happens when a consumer buys a knockoff? Like, what are the ramifications? Because, you know what, I'll be honest with you. I have been known to buy a knockoff purse in New York, yes, get the handcuffs, from my child. She wanted like a Kate Spade bag. I bought it, not thinking that there would be ramifications. So I'm sitting here red in the face today because I'm like guilty as charged. So explain to everyone why we should try and avoid this at all costs. Come on, Jamie.
Sorry. I was taking a sip of water. I'm going to admit this right here, and it's on video. I have owned fake Bertoya chairs. In my very early years of owning modern design furniture. And I don't own them anymore, and I can tell you because they were the most uncomfortable chairs I have ever sat in. And I think that that's one of the issues here, is that these products are being made, but they're not imitations because they don't have the same comfort level. They don't have the same quality. They don't have the same durability. There's so much that's different about these products, even though the form from far away looks the same. Once you get up close and you start using it, you realize this is not worth even the money I paid for it, and I would rather pay a lot more for something that fit my body and made me feel comfortable when I was sitting in it.
Well, it's quality, but I think that the American psyche in terms of purchasing is spend, spend, spend. If you can get a deal, you'll take a deal. I mean, I'm just saying. So I think everyone in this room, I know you all are guilty of this, because if I'm guilty, so are you. So besides that, like, what happens when you buy a knockoff? What are the ramifications in terms of money and all of that trickles into that whole game of counterfeit and knockoffs?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with the designer, just because that's the person that's creating the product and the idea of it and working with the factory to make it better along the way. So they're incentivized, they design for financial reasons. I mean, they do what they love. Great designers are passionate about what they do. So in the case of a large retailer working with the designer might be in-house, on an in-house team, and they actually don't own the designs, and hopefully their performance as a designer is reflected in their compensation. But I think the designers that we're talking about, and it also goes back to like handmade products and artists of the type that I worked with at Uncommon Goods, is that these people, it is very much their livelihood. They are paying their bills through royalties, and let's say, you know, it's a percentage of manufacturing cost or a percentage of wholesale cost. They're getting a check, and that's paying their bills. So to me, that's probably the easiest place to focus, just because everybody likes the David Goliath type of visual, and it's the David. But there are also implications for people like me who are running a kind of a smaller retail business with a good brand, and coming with a lot of relationships and partners. And so Paolo, who we sell Alessi, if that product gets knocked off, it affects our sales of that product, it affects Alessi's sales worldwide, it dilutes the brand that they've spent a lot of money to develop, it dilutes their investment in the R&D to get to that product. So it's a shortcut taken by other people to cash in on other people's ideas and work, and it's, at the end of the day, you're buying something cheaper that wasn't made in the same way, and the economy is rewarding people that it shouldn't.
It also undermines the creative process. What you hear from people who are designing and making items is how long that research and creative process was. It's like, oh, this took me 2 years to develop and get the manufacturing just right and get the materials right. And so that's a lot of, investment of time and energy and money. And actually, those people are taking the risk to bring something to market to kind of gel out of the air what's the next item that they think would be good design. And when somebody comes along and knocks that off or copies it, or if it starts being copied and sold in the marketplace, it undermines that process that people have invested in. And so it's important that we really try to maintain and respect that.
Right, but even for the large companies like Alessi, the amount of investment that they make in a new product line is millions of dollars. It's the big guys and the little guys that are basically losing a ton of money because of their initial investment in designing these products.
Yeah,
Am I correct in that
Oh,
assumption?
no, yeah, absolutely. On average, to develop a product from scratch for us goes from anywhere from 18 months to 10 years. And we have example, unfortunately, of projects that have taken 10 years of development. And it's also to be said, that to Josh's point, a lot of times we take risks. In our collection, some objects will go on and become bestsellers and iconic and last forever. Some others don't meet maybe they are too forward-thinking, maybe they're not ready or something else. So there is a lot of risk-taking when you introduce products, and it's sort of like very easy from somebody else to just wait and see which one of those products is going to be the bestseller and just copy that one. We have examples of product categories that we put in the market in the last, 60 years ago, and we were making 150,000 pieces a year, and now we're down to 5,000 pieces because they've been knocked off so much that it's almost impossible for us to sell the originals anymore. So talking about ramifications and the financial ramification of knockoffs, it's a hurt. It's a big hit on the company. And it really goes from small companies or big companies. It doesn't
Right.
really matter the size of the company.
No one's immune. I mean, I was shocked to hear that the estimated global value of knockoffs and counterfeits is $1.77 trillion, and it accounts for 5 to 7% of the world trade, and it also accounts for 750,000 jobs that are lost a year. So the next time you're buying that fake Cartier or me with the handbag, those are the ramifications that I think we tend to forget when we see a deal, and it's something that maybe we should be more aware of. How can the consumer or a buyer, because we're at the trade show here, actually recognize a fake? I mean, unless you're in the industry and know all the designers, I don't know whether I would initially recognize a fake. And so I'm not sure whether the consumer, how can we help the consumer with that?
Yeah, I mean, in this context, getting into the weeds of things and walking a show and showrooms that are at shows like this that are filled with knockoffs, and sometimes it's a knockoff that's actually like an accent piece. They're not even necessarily making it their focus. Maybe they're selling it. Maybe they're just decorating with it. Even shows themselves when they furnish a room like this, they have to make a decision about the chair and whether or not they even have access to something that's original, or there's even that conversation. Maybe that doesn't happen. So, but you'd be surprised, because the people that are really have businesses built entirely off of this, the knockoff model. That is the model. It's almost like they're the ones, they hide. It's the showrooms that are hardest to walk into, and they have a front desk that's trying to keep you away. And some people there's reckless disregard. We were talking about this earlier, and it's like there's millions of products here at the show, and there's no way, I might know a lot about authentic modern furniture and maybe something just as a consumer about some other stuff, and I've walked lots of shows at this point, but it's a very, very hard thing. So there are products, going back to counterfeit versus knockoff, where it's like, all right, I know that person is not selling Louis Vuitton purses. That doesn't make sense, and it's so obvious. But there are a lot of other situations where I think you can have a conversation. I mean, one is if you're shopping online, and that's a different context where you can see pricing. If everybody is selling something for $300 and suddenly there's a $200 version of it, that is a telltale sign often.
But going into a store, or all of these buyers in the room, if they're they walk into a showroom, they're like, wow, that's really attractive, and they may not realize that there's an original design that exists.
I think a quick conversation, there's stores out there that this isn't their focus, and they actually don't have the same values as us here, and many of the people present, if not all. Everybody's here for a reason, I think. So it's a conversation. It's like, what type of products? How do you care what you're selling to your customers? Do you really care if you're selling a chair? Do you not care that someone buying that might fall and hurt themselves, or that chair is going to be on the curb of New York City because it was junky and it's not a quality, lasting product? But I think you can have a story about just the business. It's like, who do you want as partners? Who do you want to work with? You can quickly get to whether or not people the people that buy and sell, and they're just buying, they got a great deal on something made in a Chinese factory, and they saw a margin opportunity. It's really hard. I can't answer your question very well because it is nearly impossible. It's just a conversation and dialogue, and if you as a store care about your customers, you'll get to that same place if you just do that due diligence that you should do as a merchant.
Jamie, you have thoughts on this?
I have a lot of thoughts. So I was just thinking, if you make relationships with, I guess if you're a designer it's knowing where you're buying from. So, you know, buying from stores or manufacturers that you know make quality, you know, original, authentic design. So that would be number one. But I guess as a buyer, just making the right decisions for your brand and what you want to offer your customers. Because do you really want to get, you know, a chair returned to you like every 5 minutes because it keeps breaking, or do you want to sell your customers beautiful, amazing things so that they keep coming back to you when they need other pieces, but these are pieces that are going to last them, you know, for a long time. But back to the question about educating people, it's so hard, and even as a media, it's nearly impossible to know every chair that's ever been designed or every lamp that's ever been designed. So I've fallen prey to snapping a photo and being like, look at this great chair, and someone will be like, oh, that's a knockoff of so-and-so, and then I look it up and sure enough it is. And you know, it's even hard for someone like me who's been looking at modern design for years and years. I don't know everything.
Well, nobody
And so
does. And
even like the iconic pieces, there are it's an education gap that's so difficult to communicate. And so I don't really think the average person is just going online searching for knockoff deals. You know, they're just looking at a picture that they saw on Pinterest or in a magazine, and they're like, oh, that's a pretty room. I like those chairs. I want to buy them. Where can I find them? You know, and they do a Google image search, and they've come up with, you know, some random store that sells something similar.
I did see something that I thought was really unique, and you guys are all familiar with it. There's Design Within Reach actually does something very interesting. They actually give you the history of the original design, and they sell the original design. And I think the fact that and they're also members of Be Original America. So I think that they've taken on the role of part of the job of a retailer is to educate what you're carrying in your store. So it's not just product. There's a story behind it. And I guess what Josh, you're saying is, as a buyer, you should ask the question, is this original? Who made this chair? Is this something that was made in-house by your company? I think we all have to take a little bit of the responsibility in terms of knowing what you're buying, knowing what you're selling.
You know, as a museum store buyer, what we put in the store is an extension of the museum experience. And when people are in there, they expect that we've selected items based on that we know the background, we know the designer. People want to support designers and makers, and they want to support the museum. So just in the same way that our customer makes that demand from us, I find when I'm shopping, I want to know where things come from. I think it's actually the responsibility of the merchant who's presenting to the public to say, you know, I know where this comes from, I know about the manufacturing process, I know about the factory, or I know the designer and I know the studio, and it's an edited selection we've put together because that represents our mission.
Yeah. Well, I know, Alessi, in the stores, you actually have information on each of the pieces. And it's funny when you go into one of their stores, it feels more like a museum because it's interesting to just read about the product. And you guys also talk about the development of those products. And you're very proud of it, which I applaud you for doing that as a retailer, manufacturer, you're many things.
Well, there's also, you know, showing the behind the process, and that's one thing Alessi does really well, and I appreciate about him, is they show how those are developed and how molds are made and how that object came to be. And, you know, that makes it more interesting, it makes you value it more, and that's also what consumers want to know too.
And going back to the business side, and Jamie was making a point earlier about this idea of them coming back to you. And you know, there's a metric that big retailers use called lifetime value that maybe an independent shop would not use. But really, that's like, it's good business to provide a great experience to your customer, a new customer, and have them come back and shop with you over and over again. And then another point that goes back to Alessi is that you're incorporating stories about designers and brands. If you're a multi-brand retail experience, there's actually really interesting because some companies like Alessi, it's very much a manufacturing story as well. And some retailers, just because of market forces, like they might work with an authored product by a specific designer that has all the like stamps of authenticity and heritage, and they might have to resource that to another factory. So it's just, I'm giving an example of a layer of detail that we might not even, the market, it might not even be that meaningful yet.
Right.
But it could get to that place because it's really cool to think that someone who's been making this coffee pot for the last 3 decades is still making it, and that's part of the experience you have as a user of it.
Yeah, and I also think as media, it's my responsibility to communicate these stories, because if you're not going to Alessi's website or going into one of their stores, you might not be familiar with the story. And the majority of my readers are in the design industry in one way or another, but they might not be furniture designers. So we do a monthly column where we follow along the process of making a product, and sometimes we work with a maker that's making something out of wood, and it's like one guy working out of his garage, and the next month we'll work with like a big retailer or manufacturer like Alessi and follow along the process. So I think communicating those stories to as many people as possible is very important. So that's something we try to continue to do on a regular basis.
So do you think buying the original has the cachet in the American consumer's mind to make them switch?
I don't. I mean, we're talking about, design within reach. We're talking about a very small percentage of the
You're talking about the
American
high
audience.
end.
Yeah. I really don't. I think that in general, consumers in America are still driven by price, and there's an appreciation for design that's coming along with the help of Apple and others. But if you work internationally and you get to know kind of some of the European markets, this is the thing. It's things that they grew up with. It's generation after generation that there's an appreciation for these things. There's conversations about it. So I'm saying this because really the effect on the American market is that price becomes the key focus in that shopping experience. Let's say it's selection. It's about selection, service, and price. Some people are kind of willing to forego the service because they're so price focused. So when you have products that are, going back to that example, if you have the $300 products and then there's something that looks like it that's $200, there's still this inclination, and that's why there are companies that have done well, because it's not illegal in some cases, it's unethical, it's a shortcut, and it's stealing in a highly unethical way, but they can't go to jail, and they're not going to necessarily be a loser in a lawsuit.
So Paolo, in Italy, do people decide to spend more on an original, or are they having the same issue that we are having in America?
No. It's a very, very widespread problem. Italian consumers, they buy knockoffs too. And one of the things that I would like to say is that sometimes people might think that this is the knockoffs come from the Far East. It's not true. They come from everywhere, including Italy. Italian imitators knock off Alessi, and from Germany, from everywhere, from the US. So it's really a very widespread problem. And consumers in Italy do buy knockoffs too.
So in terms of this problem, tell me what we're going to see in the marketplace. If you had a crystal ball in 5 years, are we going to be able to cut off the head of the snake or not?
Well, there are good signs. Of course, I'm going to plug the original Americas here, but small organizations like ours are making an impact. We've seen a lot of things that we're doing that actually have triggered reactions and actions from media, from the magazines, from trade shows. So I think the more you talk about an issue like this, the better. I think the internet, even though on one side it really helps the diffusion of knockoffs, but on the other side it also gives us a way to talk about originality and authenticity in an effective way. So I think it's and also there are good signs from the legislation side of the matter. So there have been recent instances in which big lawsuits have been won by companies against imitators, and all of the legal body that has been very developed for things like music, for things like fashion, is slowly trickling down into design as well. So I'm not that pessimistic.
Okay.
It's only mine.
Howard, are you seeing optimism out there?
You know, I do actually feel optimistic when I was reading, getting kind of prepared for this and thinking about the topics, and because I don't deal in the furniture business a lot, but I'm in accessories in the gift world, and in my career there, I recall times when there have been a lot of what we would call knockoffs, where you know, somebody would be showing something in, say, Accident Design in New York, and then the next year other people in other parts of the building would be doing the same thing. And I actually see less of that. But I was also thinking that there's kind of a resurgence of people being of a creative and manufacturing spirit in the United States. And as
Right.
that has come along, there's more appreciation of what original design is. That it's sort of, to me, it feels like it's coming back, and that I see that in our customers as well. That people
Making.
that people want to know where something comes from, and I feel like, and in reading the original website, and understanding that it kind of goes right in line with, you know, people who value sustainability, sort of responsibility, and understanding like how things are made and where the money is going to support, you know, who are you supporting when you're buying this? And our customers want to know where their money is going when they buy something. And so I actually feel like that forums like this, as well as kind of recognizing parts of the world where there is a kind of appreciation, and then emphasizing that as role models for other people, to where it becomes kind of a like social, like peer pressure that, you know,
Right.
you want to be doing the right thing.
Well, now there's a guilt associated with,
Yeah.
I bought a fake.
Yeah,
And
well,
I think that
or, you know,
years ago there wasn't.
right. I mean, and yes, so I think that would be, it seems like that would, I see more of that, so I'm somewhat optimistic.
Jamie?
Yeah, I think on social media too, there's such an outlet now for artists and makers who find other people knocking off their products or their designs. They call them out on it on social media with no problem. They're just like, hey, look at this company. They just knocked off my product. And those companies all of a sudden are shamed into being found out that they're doing these really shady practices. And, you know, some really big companies have ended up pulling products or stopping manufacturing on certain products because of all of this public shaming. And I'm not saying like we should all go out and start spreading, you know, all these terrible things about people, but at the same time, I think it's important that you know,
you
the artists and
police-
the designers like have a voice, and I think social media gives them that voice and that opportunity to say, hey, what this company is doing is wrong, you know, and I need some support for this
Right.
from my community.
Yeah, I think, well, if there's anybody from Google here, I think at some point they could add a layer to their search results that actually filter this out. And there's image recognition software out there. Like, it's plausible that that we could solve for it that way. I think that there are also there's a lot of innovation going on, and some, you know, Kickstarter and some of those projects that are like launching there. That first to market, things are happening so fast that being first to market can be very powerful from an economic standpoint and help deter things, especially if you're doing something that really nobody else can do. And but that's the issue, is that sometimes it's not what you're doing, it doesn't qualify for a patent, and it's
Oh.
still great. You can, you know, create a trademark, and there's ways to like mess with that attempt. So there's this gap, and I hope that 5 years, like, yes, I hope that the laws can change to acknowledge what's going on and actually start to help address it. But I think
And
that
are
that's
there standards out there? I mean, I know that in textiles that if you're taking a document fabric and you're going to change it and call it your own, you just need a 5%, a 5 to 10% difference. And it could be a leaf that's 3 inches lower on yours that's in the original. Is there that kind of standardization or regulation in the other parts of design?
I mean, I think there could be, but again, it's like there's that like 10% rule that you're kind of referring to. There's a lot of gray though at the end of the day, and there's ethical considerations involved, and I don't know. Again, if it was this easy, they would have resolved this a long time ago, and instead
Right.
you have these issues showing up in courts that get resolved, and often they're settlements that actually don't get resolved in court, so there's no new case law that actually sets a new standard, even in a small jurisdiction.
So where in the food chain of design could we see the biggest impact in getting rid of counterfeit and that whole and knockoffs? Is there one place in that food chain that really is the sweet spot for changing the dialogue?
Well, if you're not buying the product, then they're
you're
not
saying the
making any
consumer.
money. So I guess that would be like the number one thing is just don't buy it. But I also think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet was that there's original and authentic and beautiful products being designed every day that are affordable. There's no reason why you need to go out and get
Right.
upset because you can't buy a $7,000 sofa. You know, there's a beautiful $2,000 sofa that somebody spent 2 years designing and developing, and their whole family's gonna benefit when you buy that sofa. So I don't think it's also about, you know, only being able to afford it. It's not that situation. It's more about buying products that you love and you love to look at and you want to live with every day, and
And they're
that are
well
quality, right? Well designed, quality, you know.
You know, I think every step of that chain is somebody's responsible, you know. But I think as I said earlier, I think the retailer or the distributor, whoever's presenting it to the public to buy, has a responsibility to be somewhat of a filter at that level. Even though, you know, it falls at every level. I also think at the manufacturing level, there's a lot of sourcing that happens, and it's where they bring source material together and to make product, and that is an important place to understand where those source materials are coming from.
Yeah, and trade shows too. I mean, we have examples of, I think we can say the name, Maison et Objet in Paris, that they were notified that there was a company exhibiting last year, and they were displaying knockoffs, and the organization of the trade show went there and they invited them out.
All right,
I just was going to say something about, you know, sort of trying to regulate the
I don't know why yours goes.
the marketing or the design, because you know, in the business I'm in, there's lots of trends, and so things come along, and then they start trends, and then other people start doing it, and then a new trend happens.
Right.
And, you know, from my own experience, when I had Triangle Studio, I developed a whole textile line at Home Textiles, and we were doing well and got an award at the show, and then at some point, a national home company came out with a whole brand that looked exactly
It's
like
not good to be at the top of the food chain because then you're a target.
We're, you know, the people in that part of the show are always seen as people are always watching. And when this company came out with their whole textile line, everybody thought we had designed it for them, which of course we hadn't. And then the other problem was because their volumes were bigger, their retail prices were what our wholesale prices were. So for me, as the sort of creator of that brand, of our company, I was looking at that was the sign that I needed to start moving direction and moving on with kind of how we were pursuing our business. But and because you don't always have the resources to go after somebody for doing something
Right.
like that.
As a young designer, it's horrible if you're ripped off and you don't have a lot of resources to go after it. And I think that's the scariest part is that we are kind of on the verge of losing a lot of young designers who opt out because they don't want to play this game. It's too much. They can't afford it. Okay, thank you, everyone, and thank you, panelists.